Okay. So in this lesson, we are going to describe the structure and function of cholinergic synapse, including the role of calcium ion. Cholinergic synapse means you already know synapse is a junction between two neurons. Okay. Cholinergic means what is the type of chemical that the neuron will send in order to send the message from one neuron to the next neuron. So it sends the acetylcholine. So that's why the word cholinergic comes from the chemical name acetylcholine as a chemical messenger across the synapse. Okay, because our neuron can also send other types of chemicals which are not cholinergic, not acetylcholine. Okay. So you're going to look at structure and function of cholinergic synapse, as well as the roles of synapses in the nervous system. That means to say that why must we have got synapse? Why can't we have got one neuron that stretch all the way from the brain to your toe, from the brain to your heart, from the heart to your brain, and so on? Why must it divide into different synapses? Okay. Why must it have got different junctions and connect with different neurons? Okay. So this is the structure of the synapse. So this part here is the synaptic knob. This part here is the axon, okay, of the presynaptic neuron. Means the neuron before, pre means before, the synapse is the junction. Then this represents the postsynaptic neuron, means the neuron after the synapse. Okay, and this represents postsynaptic membrane. I've drawn it thicker because I want to show the channel protein inside it. So I've drawn it thicker. Okay. So this part here can be the dendrite or the cell body of the postsynaptic membrane. These are the synaptic vesicle. So the vesicle at the synapse. Okay. And this is the presynaptic membrane. I've drawn it thicker because in actual scenario, it's actually thicker. It's darker, thicker. Okay. Now, this little space between the presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron is called synaptic cleft. It's about 20 nanometers. Now, these tiny little dots that I've drawn here represent the neurotransmitter, which is actually the chemical that carry the message to be passed from presynaptic neuron to postsynaptic neuron. So this chemical general term is called neurotransmitter because it transmits the message between two neurons at the synapse. And the name of the actual name of this chemical is acetylcholine. So this is my short form for acetylcholine. Acetylcholine. Okay. So I've drawn this channel protein, which is actually called the ligand-gated sodium ion channel protein. Okay, so therefore, on this ligand-gated sodium ion channel protein, there are receptors for the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So I've labeled this sodium ion channel, but more accurately, according to your new textbook, is actually ligand-gated sodium ion channel protein. So please add in ligand-gated sodium ion channel protein. So when we say synapse, right, everything, the whole thing in this diagram is actually the synapse because it's a junction between the neuron. So it includes the synaptic knob, synaptic cleft, as well as the cell body of the presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron. So this whole thing is the synapse, not this tiny little space between these two neurons. This tiny little space is not the synapse. It's called the synaptic cleft. Okay, synapse must include both the pre and postsynaptic neuron. This part here. Okay. So this is a diagram to show you that. So this is a cell body of postsynaptic neuron. This is synaptic knob of the presynaptic neuron. It can arrive to the cell body. It can arrive to the dendrites. Okay. So now we're going to look at the transmission of impulses across the synapse. So step number 1, an action potential arrives. So it travels along the membrane, right? Arrives to the synaptic node. And then number 2, the action potential causes uptake of calcium ion. So the calcium ion channels will open. Then calcium will diffuse down its concentration gradient into the cell. So there's a passing question that asks a student, why is it the calcium ion can diffuse into the cell? Of course, this will use your AS knowledge, right? The fact that it diffuses in because there's a concentration gradient. The fact there's concentration gradient because there must be an active transport that creates that concentration difference across the membrane. That means along the membrane, there could be some carrier protein that actively pump calcium ion out of the cell using ATP. Okay, then only when sodium ion channels open, sodium will automatically diffuse down concentration gradient into the cell. So this question asked in exam. That means some AS knowledge you need to know. Okay, understood, Rana? Number 3, calcium ions cause the vesicle. So step number 3, this synaptic vesicle will then move towards the presynaptic membrane, fuses with it, releases content by exocytosis, and then this content is the neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, diffuse across synaptic cleft, bind to the receptor of the ligand-gated sodium ion channel, and because of that, sodium ion channels open. Can you see that? Those without the acetylcholine, they are closed. Those with acetylcholine, they are open. So when it opens, sodium ion will diffuse into the cell, and then it will cause the membrane to depolarize. And then after that, membrane potential goes above threshold potential, action potential generated and is transmitted along the neuron. Okay, so this membrane potential at the postsynaptic neuron is given a special name called EPSP, excitatory postsynaptic potential. Do you need to memorize? You don't need to memorize, just for your knowledge. Okay. Now, what happens after that? After that, acetylcholine esterase, this enzyme in the tissue fluid, must catalyze the breakdown of acetylcholine. Okay, so that when it's broken down, it will actually be released from the receptor. So it will be removed away from the receptor because the shape has changed, it cannot bind anymore. Then after that, it will be transported back to the presynaptic neuron, and using ATP, both of them are combined together again to form acetylcholine. So this enzyme is very important because if you see, if this enzyme is not there, what happened? If this enzyme is not there, that means acetylcholine continue to bind to the receptor, sodium ion channels continue to open, sodium ions continue to diffuse into the cell. So when the cell finish its refractory period, remember, it's activated and send action potential, right? And it experiences refractory period. When the cell finishes its refractory period, it comes back to resting potential because there are more sodium ions inside the cell. Again, this will actually cause action potential to be produced again. And then after that, it will fire another action potential. Then after it finishes its refractory period, it goes back to rest. Then again, this sodium ion is still there, you stimulate it again and send another action potential. So the result is this neuron will keep on firing. Firing what? The action potential. Okay. So which means to say that it will be defective for this person already, because let's say, for example, you want to pull your finger away from something. So you send a message to the muscles at your finger and your hand and you pull it away already. Then you finish your job, but then your nerve is still firing. So you keep on pulling. Then you vibrate like that. Okay. So therefore, acetylcholine has to be removed, being catalyzed by enzyme acetylcholine esterase. So that your nerve, so that there's no more acetylcholine bind to the receptor, so that the ligand-gated sodium ion channels will not open, so that sodium will not stream in, so that membrane will not depolarize, so that no action potential can be generated, so that the action potential not being fired continuously. Okay, So this is a diagram to show you the synapse. So you can see synapse is here because the membrane here is thicker and darker. You see the line here is thicker and darker. Same as for this. So both the pre and post-synaptic neuron membrane is actually darker, thicker. And here got a lot of vesicles. So this one most probably is synaptic knob, right? Because it looks like a knob here. This one is also a synaptic knob. Whereas this one looks more like either it is, it most probably is, it can be a dendrite or cell body, yeah? Okay. So this one is to show you that, so the synaptic knob can arrive to dendrite or cell body. And this synaptic knob can come from the same neuron or different neurons. Okay. So you can see here, this one cell body got so many synaptic knobs attached to it, right? So many. Okay. So now we want to learn what is the role of synapse. Why must we have got so many synapses, okay, between the neuron? Why can't we just have one neuron and send the whole thing from the receptor to effector? Okay, why must there be junction? Okay, two roles. Two roles. First, to allow unidirectional transmission. That means action potential can only be passed in one way. That means from dendrite to the synaptic knob in one direction. Okay, so why? Because synaptic vesicles are present in presynaptic neuron. Okay, whereas acetylcholine receptors are found in postsynaptic neuron. So the only way for the message to be transmitted, it must be from presynaptic neuron to postsynaptic neuron. So unidirectional transmission. So that impulses are passed from pre to post. So this is the direction supposed to go, not the other way. Okay. Second role of synapse is for interconnection between the nerve pathways. Okay. That means to allow all sorts of possible connection between different nerves in the body to increase the possible range of responses to a stimulus or responses to many stimuli. Okay. So you need to draw this into your notes. You need to draw this into your notes. Okay. So these are two examples of possible interconnection between nerve pathways. Divergence means from one neuron, it can connect to many neurons, so diverge. Convergence means come together. So from many neurons, it can send message to one neuron. So what is the example I can give you here is, for example, first example, what is so good about divergence? Say, for example, you are doing a performance where you need to sing, you need to dance. Oh, okay. So you can be sending a message from your brain, and this one can be go to one muscles in your leg and the muscle in your arm and muscles in your on your face and all sorts of muscles to allow coordination. Okay, allow all sorts of coordination and response. Okay. Now, second example I can give you is, say for example, this is example. You want to study biology. Okay, this one the moment you fire action potential here is you go and study biology. But before you go and study, there are many distraction one. Okay, your mind will send a message that I'm sleepy. This one will send a message that I'm hungry. This one will send a message that I don't want to study already. Okay, this one will send a message that tomorrow got exam. So will you go and study biology? Who's the next one? Will you go and study biology? Tan Pei Wen?
No.
No, right? It depends on which one is stronger, isn't it? So say, for example, this one is you want to go and sleep, or action potential very high up frequency. This one you want to eat because you're very hungry. Oh, the frequency even higher. See, very high, very high. This one tomorrow got exam. I don't care. So eventually what you do, you go and eat lah. After that, what you do, you go and sleep. After that, what you do, maybe you study. Maybe only because why? Frequency too small. Okay, not strong enough. Correct or not? Okay, very interesting, right? So therefore, you see, why do we want to have a synapse? Because we want to allow interconnection between different nerve pathways to provide us many possible responses to one stimulus or one stimulus to many responses. Okay. So interconnection of neurons at the synapse allow a wide range of actions in response to a stimulus, or I can say that an action in response to many stimuli. So it's very interesting here. Okay. So make sure you draw that diagram into your notes. Okay. So what you have learned today is the structure and function of cholinergic synapse. Excuse me. The roles of synapses in the nervous system, okay, which is unidirectional transmission and interconnection between nerve pathways. So we got interconnection, which is convergence and divergence. Okay, so we're finished for today's lesson. The next lesson you learn is the role of sensory receptor cell. That means receptor. You're going to learn one receptor. Okay, how this receptor can kickstart an action potential in the sensory neuron. All right, so that's all for today. Thank you very much.